Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Beyond GDP, National Accounting for the Ocean and Ocean Economy. Today is the launch of the 12th in a series of 16 blue papers commissioned by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, or the Ocean Panel for short. These blue papers were commissioned by the Ocean Panel to provide a comprehensive assessment of ocean science and knowledge that has significant policy relevance to support the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the UN Decade of Ocean Science, which begins next year. Today's paper, titled National Accounting for the Ocean and Ocean Economy, highlights the opportunity for incorporating ocean accounts into national accounting frameworks and the data and technology already available at our fingertips to do so. As with each blue paper and special report that has been commissioned by the Ocean Panel, we hope this paper helps key decision makers better understand the opportunities for action. We're therefore also thrilled to be able to feature in today's webinar a new initiative, the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, which was created to take forward many of the recommendations that will be highlighted in the paper presented today. We have a fantastic panel lined up for you today on what is one of the foundational elements for a sustainable ocean economy. As we know, what is measured gets managed. I am Eliza Northrop, and I have the privilege of moderating today's panel. I am joined by the co-lead author for the blue paper, Eli Fenischer, a Knobloch Family Professor of Natural Resource Economics at the Yale School of Environment. Eli will be providing the keynote presentation to kick off today's panel discussion. We are also delighted to have with us Catherine Blewett, Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and Associate Secretary to the Cabinet. Catherine is also the Sherpa to the Prime Minister of Canada, who is one of the 14 members of the Ocean Panel. We also have Glenn Marie Lang, Senior Environmental Economist at the World Bank and a contributing author for the paper. We have Tirupong Prapuchapon, who leads the Asia Pacific Communities of Practice for the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership. We also have David Abura, Director of Cordio East Africa. And certainly last but not least, we have Claire Jolly, who heads the Ocean Economy Group at the OECD. So a couple of housekeeping items before I get started. If you don't already follow us on Twitter, please do so. The name is on the screen at the moment. We welcome engagement throughout this webinar on Twitter. Please make sure to use the hashtags that are on the screen at the moment. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on Zoom from tomorrow using the link that you joined with today. And we'll also have that available early next week on the events page at the World Resources Institute. Today's blue paper, along with all the blue papers that we've been published so far, are available on the Ocean Panel website. Now, for today's discussion, we encourage you to post your questions as they arise over the course of the panel. Please type them in the question and answer box within Zoom at the bottom of your screen. The panel will have the opportunity to respond to these questions following the moderated portion of the discussion. Please try to indicate which panelist you'd like to respond, and please focus on writing a question rather than a statement. So a very quick overview on the Ocean Panel for those of you that might not have joined us before. The Ocean Panel was established in 2018 and is made up of 14 serving world leaders that have been working to achieve key objectives of enhancing humanity's relationship with the ocean, bridging ocean health and wealth, working with diverse stakeholders, harnessing the latest ocean knowledge, and developing an action agenda for transitioning to a sustainable ocean economy. The Ocean Panel aims to facilitate a better, more resilient future for people and planet through delivering a sustainable ocean economy where effective protection, sustainable production, and equitable prosperity go hand in hand. It's co-chaired by Norway and Palau and is the only ocean policy body made up of serving world leaders with the authority needed to trigger, amplify, and accelerate action for ocean health. The Ocean Panel represents nations of highly diverse oceanic, economic, and political perspectives, as you can see on the screen. They are nations both large and small across all ocean basins and at every stage of economic development. These nations account for nearly a third of the world's coastlines and a third of the world's exclusive economic zones, 20% of the world's fisheries, and 20% of the world's shipping fleet. Quite an impressive bunch. So I will now give the floor to the co-lead author of today's blue paper on national accounting, Eli Fenichel, to guide us through the main findings of the paper and some of the recommendations for action. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's great to finally be doing this after a few months of delay. I want to start by thanking all of you for joining. I want to thank Ben Milligan and Nina Porras, my co-leads, as well as all the contributing authors who you see listed here, as well as the many people who spoke with us along the way about oceans accounting, about national accounts in general, about ocean science, to help pull this whole thing together. I want to start by, why isn't this working? There we go. I want to start by highlighting what's kind of unique about this paper in this series of high-level ocean panel papers, the ocean panel papers, is we're really thinking about the entire ocean system and not a sector. And we want to think about what does it mean to have ocean development or blue development. And this is important because we all share the same ocean, but when we think about development, it's sort of a bit of an amorphous concept. We want to be worried about what are we producing and mobilizing as means for current consumption and how that relates to things like jobs. We want to be worried about not only what are we producing, but what are people actually getting from the ocean and how is that distributed? And maybe some of what people get from the ocean doesn't actually come through the market or a market production process. And we also want to be worried about protecting ocean ecosystems and providing opportunities for future generations. And all of these things have to come together to define our notion of development. And then we want to be able to ask, is that development sustainable? Is it on track? And one of the challenges is, while we all share the same oceans, and therefore we all need a commonly agreed set of facts to discuss things and grapple with our challenges. Some people think very much in physical quantity terms. Other people think very much in money and price terms. Neither group is right or wrong. We're just seeing the world from a different perspective, and that brings value in the decision-making process so long as we can all communicate. To do that, to know if we're on the right track, we need to be able to measure things, okay? And one of the challenges is we sort of define these three broad spheres. They can't be aggregated into a single metric. So we're often used to thinking about production and mobilization of resources. And I say mobilization in the context of the ocean because what we're actually doing is often going out and harvesting things. This is kind of what happens in more frontier-like economies, but these feed into a common metric of production into something called a product account, something like a GDP or a gross value add. That's one important measure, but it's not the only one. We also want to be, like I said, concerned with what people are actually getting and ultimately how that's distributed. We might be interested in something like a net national product, or a net national income measure as another measure to understand the complexity of the ocean. Finally, to think about the opportunities for future generations, we need to know if we're passing on a bigger, broader opportunity set. We think of this as the change in wealth or the change in a balance sheet. But when we think of wealth, we want to define that wealth over a broad set of assets, not just including our ports and ships, which are important. We also want to include our biological assets, coral reefs, fish stocks, ocean primary productivity. All of these things matter as well. In order to build a dashboard like this, what that dashboard is doing is it's raising up terabytes and terabytes of data. They can be stored in various tables on economic data, on physical data, on biological data. The important thing is that's a very complicated system. Now, when we were writing this, I would say no one wants to get in an airplane, and right now I can probably just stop with the current state of the world. But even if there were no pandemic, nobody wants to get in an airplane where the pilot only looks at one dial on that dashboard. And understanding our ocean economy is certainly at least as complex as an airplane. So we need at least a few high-level summaries to think about. Why do we need this? Because these measurements help us tell our stories. They help us plan future decisions and evaluate and learn from past decisions. Again, we need a commonly agreed set of facts to help frame and discuss our environmental goals. We need the ocean in the nation's national information system or its national accounts. And more than anything now, we need to worry about getting this right for a recovery from COVID-19. The current state of our national accounts was largely put in place to help do things like administer the Marshall Plan and the economic recoveries needed after World War II. We're facing a similar challenge today. And we want the ocean involved, but we also want the ocean to lead understanding just sustainable development correctly. So one of the things we did is we wanted to ask, how big a departure is this? How big of a lift would this be for countries to actually build sort of 21st century cutting edge oceans accounts? And it turns out it's quite feasible. It's not a radical departure from what we're already doing, and many countries are already on the path to doing it. So we sort of framed this analysis in 3 parts. We looked at the questions that accounts could help answer. We looked at concepts and theory. We looked at the existing international standards, and we looked at conventions and practice. So very quickly, yes, the accounts can't answer all questions. There are certainly difficult ethical questions they won't tell us what we should do. They provide us information about where we are and where we've been. Their concepts and theory are actually quite well developed. We have this very nice notion of non-declining wealth, where we broadly define wealth as sort of a necessary condition for sustainability for future generations. We also need to worry about current generations. UNEP and the World Bank have already done wonderful demonstrations of the ability to build these broad wealth accounts and show how they can help us think better about sustainability. We have lots of tools, data to measure all the pieces of the ocean that we need. They're spread out, they're not all in the same spot, but they all exist and they all need a little bit of work, but they're all in existence in there. We have a really strong bones with our current system of national accounts to build from. Many of our concerns are actually in the formal guidelines when it comes to oceans already. And we're seeing great development with something called the system of environmental economic accounts, where more and more countries are doing this kind of accounting as well. So where we really started to run into problems was a bit in the current existing standards, and I'll mention one of the places to begin with, but really in conventions and practice. So one of the interesting things about our current system of national accounts is non-market products like subsistence fishing are already supposed to be included in the production of a country. But countries generally struggle to include production that doesn't happen in sort of the formal money economy. This is just an implementation challenge. One of the other challenges is, if you read the actual guidelines for the system of national accounts, which I only recommend if you have insomnia, there's a big discussion about excluding household produced services, but not excluding household produced goods. The problem with this is many of our ocean services that people sort of go out and get for themselves, leisure, sense of place, these are effectively household produced services. So they're currently excluded. I think there's a very active discussion about whether that's the right decision. We might see a change in that in the revision of the system of national accounts guidelines that are sort of just getting started now. The other challenge is, while the system of national accounts tells us to keep these balance sheets, we need to measure sustainability. Countries generally don't do a great job maintaining balance sheets, especially with respect to non-produced capital, which is where most of our natural capital, our fish stocks, our coral reefs, etc., would sit. What we do see on the positive side, again, is a number of countries starting to implement this system of environmental economic accounting. So I think there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of knowledge of these challenges, and there's a lot of progress. So one of the other things we did is we took a look at what are countries actually doing with respect to oceans accounts specifically. And what I'm going to show you is some numbers for the high-level panel countries. What I'll say is a lot of non-high-level panel countries are also doing exciting things in this area, and a lot of that's documented in the paper. I just don't have time to go through it today. So here what I'm showing you is what sort of countries are doing with some ocean sectors within the ocean economy, and what we were able to find sort of in the public domain for what was being done. So pretty good job with fisheries and tourism. Other sectors are a little bit more difficult. Transportation's hard because often it's not parsed by ocean. But just to highlight some of the things going on, Portugal and Canada have dedicated satellite accounts for the ocean. Fiji maintains very detailed accounts for its marine biological resources. Ghana has a fisheries GDP on sort of the headline page of its reports. There's a lot of exciting stuff already going on with measuring the ocean in the economy. Like I said, when we start looking at the balance sheets, it's a little bit less rosy of a picture. When we look at the 14 high-level panel countries, what we see is less than half of them maintain non-produced assets on their balance sheets. And only 2 of the 14 countries we looked at actually had something that looked like an ocean's non-produced asset, where the biological capital would be or the natural capital would be. So again, I think this is an area where some improvement could be built. We put a number of recommendations in the report, but I want to just highlight 2. First, we need to ditch our 20th century reporting system. We need to move our focus from writing reports, PDFs with summary statistics, and move to interactive dashboards. There's a couple key reasons for this. One is we have so much rich data, and not all data is relevant for every decision. It's important to be able to sort of subset and drill down. But particularly when we talk about things like the ocean, one of the biggest challenges we found talking to people was actually defining the boundaries of the ocean economy. So by moving to a dashboard, one of the things we can do is we can actually toggle, and you can see right up here, here we go. Right up here on the dashboard we built, you can actually select what subsectors of the ocean you want to consider in your ocean economy. So what you can do is you can ask if some of the ongoing arguments about the boundaries even matter for the inference you want to make. We can do the same thing with techniques. We need a small number of high-level summaries, but the ability to drill down. So this image is actually a screenshot. You can go to this web link here and play with a real interactive version of this dashboard. And I want to say this is incredibly feasible to do. This is for Norway, and Norway has good accessible data, but they don't actually have a dashboard or an ocean account. Ethan Atticott, a PhD student of mine, put this together in about 3 weeks with off-the-shelf software. So this was work. I don't want to trivialize Ethan's work, but it's certainly doable, and this pulls live from Norway, from various Norway agencies to update as new data come in. The data are coming fast and furious, and I think what we need to do is move away from over-obsessing on the summary statistics to really focusing on the algorithms to process and sort of make that data useful for policymakers. Again, many of these decisions about particularly boundaries and what's in and what's out are fundamentally political decisions that our leaders need to make. And right now, a lot of those decisions are being made by people like me or by statisticians because of the focus on getting to a single end product, rather than sort of making the methodology easy for anyone to do. The other thing that we found that was really interesting here was that the supply and use table structure that's used in national accounts actually aligns quite nicely with sort of modern ecosystem models like EcoPath, EcoSim, or Atlantis, if you're familiar with those models. The final thing is, if I had one thing to say to world leaders about oceans accounts, is the most important thing they can do is actually just provide leadership by asking questions about changes in wealth, changes in national balance sheets, changes in real income and its distribution, along with GDP. GDP is important. It has a very important role in monetary policy, in certain government finances, etc. However, it doesn't answer all the policy questions. And having a subset of things and raising the conversation to realize that we need to look at how much is in our bank account along with how much cash is in our wallet. Those are both important for sort of long-term policy making. We just need to ask those questions. And I think by asking those questions, it will make it easier for agencies to work together, for disciplines to work together, by providing demand and a use case. The other things that I should say is repeated measures are much better than one-offs. It's really easy. It's relatively easy to write a one-off shiny paper brochure about like the state of your ocean economy and leave it. It's not particularly helpful. for long-term decision-making. That's what we repeatedly heard from people who use these kinds of accounts for other sorts of decision-making, is you really need to commit to producing them regularly. Finally, the ocean account needs to be part of a broader system of national accounts. The concepts, the theory, they're there. We don't need to invest in new ways of measuring the ocean. We need to do what we've already committed to do and tweak it a little around the edges. We need to put the oceans in the context of broader sustainable development. And I think we have a real opportunity to lead the way we measure and discuss sustainable development by the way we do so for the sustainable ocean economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. That was fascinating. And I think for those of us that don't come from a sort of traditional economic background, I think on first face value, really, ocean accounts can seem quite a foreign technical concept. But I think what this paper really does brilliantly is highlight how central ocean assets are to the story of our not only ocean economy, but sort of much broader economy. And I think, you know, if we have this vision for an ocean economy that can continue to feed our children and our children's children and provide innovation and economic opportunities for all members of our society, you know, we really need to understand the impact that the decisions we're making today has on whether or not we're able to achieve that vision, which I think is really one of the central messages that comes through the paper, which is incredibly helpful for decision makers. And I suppose the positive message that this is not out of our reach, that we have the data, we have the technology to make that happen now, which is quite exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn over to our excellent panel. And I think we're going to have everyone on the screen so the audience can see them. So Catherine, I'm going to turn to you first. As I said at the start, Canada is one of the 14 members of the Ocean Panel. And one of the key propositions for the panel is that a sustainable ocean economy is one that promotes protection, production, and prosperity. In your view, why is the inclusion of ocean data into national accounting systems so critical to achieving this vision that the panel has? And then sort of more specifically, where do you see the opportunities for Canada's ocean economy and the communities and the sectors that rely on it? Catherine, I'm not quite sure we can hear you actually. So I might, if you're able to connect, otherwise, I think that's...
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
can you hear me now? Oh,
yes, we
amazing.
Can. Sorry.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I said so many very nice things about you all, and I'm sorry it was on mute. So look, thank you very much, Eliza. Thank you for the question. Apologies, colleagues and panel members. I'm really delighted to have the chance to participate today. Certainly the high-level panel, our focus is on the goal of building a sustainable ocean economy globally. So the framing questions are really excellent. I think all countries need to consider which parts of the national economy rely on the ocean, and does the growth of ocean industries ultimately make a country richer or poorer in the long term? So look, these are critical questions for a country like Canada. We have the largest coastline in the world. In the Canadian context, the government is working to demonstrate that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. Ultimately, I think it's going to rely on our ability to use data to assess factors kind of beyond a single indicator like GDP. I'm not an economist, and thankfully this panel features preeminent economists in this space from across the globe that we'll have an excellent discussion about what is truly possible to measure. As the Sherpa for Canada's Prime Minister and as a senior advisor in the Canadian government, I'm really much more focused on the why we need to measure. Eli, I liked your point about, more data lets leaders actually ask important questions. Pretty fundamental, right? More robust and comparable data helps nations make policy decisions on a range of things: effective ocean management, marine resources. Another thing that it's broader, and David actually showed us before the panel started an editorial cartoon that sort of showed the multiple waves that the globe is facing, and really understanding the contribution that the ocean makes to offsetting climate change is and supporting biodiversity in the planet, pretty critical. So we are very focused on what we can do to enhance the availability and the interoperability of data. So pretty self-evident that you need good data to make sound policy decisions. Oceans accounts are absolutely going to help us quantify the important human dimension. When we think about Canada, again, particularly, we want to make sure that we understand the impact on rural, diverse communities. We want to understand we've got the high north in Canada and east and west. We're a federation. We have subnational governments. We actually have to think about how the information and the costs and benefits are assessed across the federation. So I will tell you that the work that's happening in Canada, I hope we'll have a chance to chat about it a little bit more, but the work that's happening in Canada, it's going to help us figure out whether we are on track to achieve some of the government's commitments. Canada has made significant commitments with respect to marine conservation. We're delighted on where we're situated, but now the government has made additional commitments moving to conserving 25% of the oceans by 2025. And then we're going to have a 30 by 2030 conversation. So again, common for all of the HLP countries, it's going to be the desire to achieve something to sustain ocean economies. Eliza, right back to your opening question or premise, what gets measured gets managed. And in the context of prime ministers, of country leaders, they actually need the information to help manage those questions. So thank you for that.
Brilliant, thanks, Catherine. So I want to come back to Canada's own experience in addressing some of these challenges in a sec, but I'm going to turn first to Glenn Marie, who's from the World Bank, and the World Bank is really one of the founding members of the Global Ocean Account Partnership that I mentioned at the very start. Glenn Marie, can you sort of share some insights on how this partnership is really helping turn some of the theory of ocean accounts that we've heard of from Eli into practice globally, I suppose?
Right. So we're concerned with how do we actually get started, practically speaking, and more important even is how do we use this. So I think the work of the partnership, more of a coordinating role, but it's trying to develop and supporting the development of the detailed technical manuals that are needed to actually implement this. How do you define the different components of the ocean? How do you measure them? What are the indicators that we need at the high level? And this eventually will be part of the UN's broader system for natural capital accounting, the SIA. So that's a very important process, not only to give countries guidance on how to do this, but to give countries the confidence that they're doing this in the right way, that we're learning from each other, that this is something that makes sense. Along with that, and this is an area where the World Bank is particularly involved through the partnership, is developing the policy guidance for using ocean accounts. there's been tremendous interest and demand for blue natural capital accounting, but often people don't quite know what that is. So what we're looking at is how this could feed into marine spatial planning, which has become a very a broadly applied framework for managing with the whole coastal ocean, the whole seascape. But the economic perspective in MSP is often rather underdeveloped. So we are looking at how we can actually build this in. It can help, how it can help in not only the planning process, but also the implementation, the monitoring and evaluation that goes on afterward, and so on. We are also working to come up with some global figures, and we will have them early next year, on different pieces of the ocean accounts, marine fisheries and mangroves, mainly for their coastal protection services. So at least we will start. When people want to build ocean accounts, sometimes the first step is just a demonstration using globally available data. So we would want to provide that. Along with that, there's the training and capacity building that's very important. And some of that is just about sharing experiences. What is Indonesia doing? What is Palau doing? What has Fiji done? And there were the Ocean Accounting Partnership had planned a couple of meetings. Of course, they're not happening this year, but we did link up with the African Community of Practice on Natural Capital Accounting, and next week, together with the Global Partnership, there will be a webinar on ocean accounting in Africa that's building this network of a whole range of organizations that deal with the ocean in Africa to talk about how we can implement ocean accounting. And finally, the outreach, connecting people so that we build on the experiences of each other and learn from each other and move things forward. What are the different NGOs doing? What are the countries doing? What are some of the other international groups like the World Bank, the ADB, et cetera? What are they doing? How can we learn from it? So I think those are really the three areas in which the partnership is trying to make a contribution.
Thanks, Glenn Marie, and hopefully we can hear a little bit more from the partnership in a second. I think you highlighted what David's going to speak about, which is really that African perspective and all the excellent work that the partnership is doing there. So I'm going to come back to Catherine again. So Canada is one of the two co-chairs of the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership with UNESCAP. And so specifically, one of the barriers that the paper addresses, at least, is not so much the availability of data, as Eli said, it is there, but it's distribution across multiple government agencies and private sector sort of entities. And you sort of alluded to this earlier, Catherine, in your response about the complexity of Canada's government system and the need to really ensure coordination. How has Canada really of being able to pull together and coordinate this data for the purpose of your own ocean account?
That's great, Eliza. Thank you for the question. I hope you can hear me okay. You're exactly right. It's a challenge. I would say governments broadly, big bureaucracies. Data exists in different departments, and it's used for different things. And we've been working very hard to bring more ocean data into the main. We actually we used Canada's G7 presidency in 2018 as an opportunity to actually accelerate the work and sort of boost it, because one of the key G7 themes was working together on climate change, oceans, and clean energy. So we happen to have those portfolios distributed across the system, but the opportunity to work horizontally let us achieve many things. And one thing very clearly was the need to bring our data together. So we used that pretty shamelessly. What we found, we put different experts in the room together. We put economists and biologists in the same room together, and we brought in environmental, actually we brought in people from outside as well. It was really important to have a robust view of how we were doing and achieving or setting up to achieve tangible outcomes. So we brought in environmental organizations, we brought in Indigenous leadership. We wanted to have a really broad view to see how our decision making could be impacted by diversity of opinion and so forth. So it actually really achieved dividends for us as ministers prepared for their international ministerials. They were actually able to have really pragmatic discussions about, if we want to achieve X, we've got to also have, whether it's social license, whether we've got to have sound economics. We were able to bring people together, and we did it under the auspices of having a common objective, like the Charlevoix blueprint for healthy oceans. So I want to also sort of tell you about the legacy that the G7 left for us, which is important, and it is continuing. The work has set up in Canada. We're working in now very close collaboration. The key area for us, and it wouldn't automatically jump out, but it's of course bringing in our national statistical agency. We've got Statistics Canada just has expertise in environmental, economic, and national accounting, and they have really come on board and are wide open to walking with us to bring in our international oceans data. So we expect that the work that we're going to do together with our Stats Canada agency, it's going to let us bring robust data into many rooms. I mean, when you think about financial, think about budget making, think about very pragmatic things that are at the core. Finance economists don't actually typically look at ocean data, and we're trying to make sure that we've got a holistic set. And I would say we've been able to almost make a bit of the culture change. Glenn Marie, you talked about just the chance to talk to people and think about implications. So it's not, we're trying to talk to people about Canada's long-term bank account and not just the decisions that are in front of our noses. So again, the G7 work really spurred us on, and we actually think it's positioned Canada well to make an ongoing sort of substantive contribution to this conversation. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Catherine. That was excellent. I love the bank account methodology.
I stole that from Eli.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So in terms of, and I think some of this you might have already touched on, but where does Canada go next? What are your sort of next steps for really sort of evolving and building on the work that you've already done so far?
Well, we have, again, I've mentioned sort of a number of complementary initiatives underway, and we are pleased to be one of the founding members of the Global Oceans Account Partnership. I'm terrible with the acronym, but that is really letting us collaborate at a pretty technical level with international agencies, governments, and researchers to help organize blue data and stats for sustainable economy. So there actually are a number of things that are coming out quite quickly. There's actually an article that is about to be released with our Fisheries Department and our Statistical Agency discussing figures, and I'm going to try to read this so I don't get it wrong for all the economists to be aghast, but there's going to be a publication that comes out and it's going to actually highlight the contribution to marine industries to GDP. It's going to also talk about the direct employment numbers, and it's pretty interesting. It's able, I think, for the first time to really track the increase, the correlation with employment over a more medium term. So it's pretty interesting. It's very tangible. And again, that helps make our case. We're also doing work to expand the information data coming in areas ocean technology manufacturing, offshore wind, and marine renewable energy. Again, understanding where we're going in terms of a greener ocean economy. We want the data to support what's happening. So second, Canada is also collaborating with the OECD in its efforts to improve ocean economy measurement. And so specifically, we're contributing to the OECD's pilot project to develop an experimental ocean economy satellite account, already out of my depth in terms of what the economists would do, but we've got Claire, and I would very humbly defer to her expertise, but it's really exciting and important for Canada to be involved in that collaboration.
Fantastic, and we'll hear from Claire on that exact collaboration shortly. Before we do, I'm going to sort of take the panel slightly to the Asia Pacific region. And sort of look more tangibly into this sort of global nature of the work that the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership is doing. So Tirupong, you lead a lot of this work, previously with SCAP, now with the partnership more directly, really working with sort of developing communities of practice within the region. What are some of the unique benefits that you've seen for the sort of the island communities, I suppose, when we think of the Pacific, and why does this make sense? Why does ocean accounts make particular sense for those economies?
Thanks, Eliza. I hope you can hear me. Well, as we know, island countries depends on the ocean for their development, for their lives and livelihoods. And actually, one of my colleagues in the Pacific told me that the ocean is their kids' playing field, and that already signifies the importance of the ocean to them. And that also reflected in those countries having many plans that govern and manage its own ocean and marine resources. Some already have or move towards integrated ocean policy or marine spatial planning, as Graham mentioned. So when we look on working or formulating integrated policy that touches on economic, social, environmental, ecosystem dimensions, inevitably, we also need data that encompass those aspects in an integrated manner. And this is where ocean accounts come into play. For example, in Samoa, just to give a very practical example, tourism is one of the key economic sectors. And most tourists come to Samoa to experience this pristine ocean ecosystem. At the same time, they also use the island's scarce resources. They also increase waste and other pollution, which impact the health of the ocean. So making sector-specific interventions, for example, increase number of tourists and hopefully getting more income, looking at one-dimensional data set is no longer sufficient. And that led Samoa to pilot ocean lakehouse last year. And they're now working on the pilot extension, focusing specifically on land-based pollution. I would say the interrelationship between the economy and the ocean also applies to countries in Asia and also other parts of the world. For instance, the pilot study in Thailand also focused on tourism in the southern part of the country along the Andaman Sea. Last year, with a lot of success, this year they now invest themselves in rolling out and scaling up the work at the national level. So they see the impact of like Graham said, we could start small. We can demonstrate how pilot could be helpful for policy. One that's it proof. Once we have the proof of concept, then the use will come and the demand will follow. Another thing is, I think I should mention that ocean accounts are also good investment. There are many monitoring and reporting international commitments related to the ocean for which countries need data. it would become very challenging, particularly for island countries where resources are generally limited. It would be strategic to invest once in ocean accounts and use them for many reporting requirements, policy, and plans. So I'll stop there first.
I think building on that last point, Tirapong, not all countries have the same level of capacity, as you said. They don't all have these very robust national statistical offices. Certainly don't think that's a reason not to look into ocean accounts. But if you're a country, if you're a government decision maker watching this, what are some of the ways that countries that may not have the data or the initial capacity still start to engage in this area and start to see some of those benefits that have been outlined, drawing from your experience?
All right. I should start from how countries can see benefits of ocean accounting. So I'll try to answer that from a practitioner's point of view. Before you start any statistical work, it's very important to know why we are doing it and what is this for. So when we design a pilot study, it's critical that the ocean accounts are linked with key policy priorities and questions, which could be issues, problems, concerns that the country has about the ocean, or any key ocean-related indicators that are needed for example, for their monitoring and reporting. And that is to ensure that there are pathways from integrated evidence that will be produced out of the accounts to policy that are waiting to use those reliable statistics. This is how China linked their pilot to their ecological civilization. This is how Thailand and Samoa linked their pilots with their sustainable tourism policy, for example. This is best achieved through dialogue between data holders, data compilers, and data users. It's like what Catherine just said. So we need more than one group of people, and particularly users. So at the very least, it's always good to have someone waiting to use the results once you're done with your statistical work. Good thing about the accounts is that they don't need to be complete to be useful. The key is to make sure that the accounts are, all parts of the accounts compiled are fit for purpose. So how do we overcome capacity challenge? When it comes to ocean accounting or any CI account in general, the truth is there's no one department or one institution that has all the knowledge, all the data, or all the capacity. So the collaboration is key. So each department has unique expertise and a whole different set of information that would be valuable in different parts of the ocean accounts. So my very practical suggestion would be, if capacity is the issue, one way is to pull together existing capacity from one person in the department working alone to a 5-people team working for 5 different departments working together, achieving the same goal. And doing that gradually, incrementally, progress would be made. And in addition to interdepartmental collaboration, I think partners are also very important. And the GOAP has a clear role to play there. The ocean accounts are quite new. The term itself are also very new. So the very purpose of the GOAP is to provide both technical and strategic, as well as coordination and communication support, particularly to countries. So if you are planning to work on the ocean accounts, please do contact us. So we are ready to support you. On the data, and this is, again, Kathleen already said, that from my experience, the issue is not necessarily about lack of data. Usually there are a lot of data, both nationally and internationally, but they are collected for different purpose and scope. So when we try to put them either in an accounts form, or we try to make statistics out of them, data might not talk to each other. Even worse, they might give us conflicting information that is not very helpful for making this decision. So ocean accounts provide a framework to standardize and harmonize those data to help policymakers make complex decisions on the very complex issue of the ocean. We also have to admit, as we progress, new data collections may be needed, but it'll be much better and cost-effective if data gaps are clearly identified and prioritized through accounts. Basically, we know exactly which cells in the table that would need the data to answer the question. I think this is how things would work, and we, like people said, the long journey starts from the first step. So first thing is to try it out. Mistake is a good thing to experience. Then you know how to improve. I think that's how the community of practice in the Pacific has evolved so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Cherupong. That was excellent. I really like one of your points in there, in the sense that ocean accounts don't need to be complete to be useful. So in other words, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, or to sort of hold you back from looking into this, which I think is yeah, very relevant. Glenn-Marie, I'm going to come back to you to sort of pick up on some of this, the points that Cherupong made, particularly in terms of the support that could be provided through the partnership and many of the members of the partnership. So if you can speak a little bit to, you know, again, if you're a government watching this and you want to become involved, what support is available out there through the partnership or otherwise? And in particular, you know, what is the role of regional and international cooperation in helping countries overcome some of these challenges and access some of these supports? You know, do they have to go it alone? How do we really scale this approach?
Yeah, well, the partnership, one of its aims is to be a kind of clearinghouse and coordinate. And so it, in principle, is a good place to go and say, you know, who's out there supporting stuff now? Who might we approach for something like this? This whole work was initiated by UN's SCAP. And they funded, I believe it was 5 pilot studies in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. And there are a lot of bilateral programs as well. And I would just also say the World Bank is doing some funding in this area. We are funding Blue Natural Capital Accounting, the ocean accounts, as part of ongoing activities, not as standalone, but to make sure it's embedded in policy. And so we're working with probably about 8 to 10 countries now, mostly in Asia, but also some in Africa. But as I mentioned, this is meant to be a clearinghouse to try and get people connected with this. There's a lot of interest, but it's a little bit early days. So yes, come to the partnership and see what we can do.
Thanks, Glenn-Marie. This panel is working beautifully at introducing each other. So I'm going to take us to David now to sort of get a better understanding of some of the opportunities and some of the progress that's already been made within Africa. So David, you work, I think, predominantly in East Africa. What is the situation, you know, regarding ocean accounts at the moment? What is known about them, and where have you seen the most potential so far?
Well, thanks, Eliza. And some of the points I would make have been brought up by the panelists already. I think in particular, you know, the webinar that's coming up next week in terms of introducing sort of African states and the community of practice to ocean accounts, because really I think we're at the first level of awareness about what ocean accounts are. I come to this as an ecologist working on coral reefs and working with monitoring systems and data to try and inform policy. And even from my perspective, when I first started hearing about ocean accounts, I know about natural capital accounting, of course, and I think we really need to count what we have in ecosystems and nature in order to manage it well and value it. But the term accounts to me tended to imply monetary and economic valuation, whereas I've come to understand that really it's about pulling together information and data sets in natural units, in the ways they are already being measured in many cases, and making the data systems more compatible in order to be able to compile them together and really look across the board at what's happening. So we're really right at the beginning of doing that in East Africa. There's a lot of interest already in marine spatial planning. And of course, that needs data sets as well of many different things across different sectors, different ecosystems and resources and uses and so on. And there's probably a great potential for synergies in terms of building up data systems for marine spatial planning in countries and what ocean accounts can offer for that. So I think that's an area of great potential. There is a pilot study that's already being done in Kenya that is WWF supported, around the blue economy and using the ocean accounting framework. And of course, as a pilot study, experiencing and seeing the challenges in accessing data and bringing together data from different sectors together in government and from different agencies that often have very different data standards and even measure the same thing in different ways in some cases. So I think the policies and practices for standardization that Ocean Accounts offers will offer a lot. I think lastly, I would say that particularly in Africa, I mean, Africa with the Sustainable Development Goals being, a primary global organizing framework that all countries have committed to under the UN systems, is that the challenge in dealing with 17 different goals is, of course, they're very different from each other. And how do you measure them? And the official monitoring framework and indicators for the SDGs is very high level in many cases in terms of policies and regulations and so on. And perhaps setting up these national accounting systems can really help with the tangible in-country measurement and assessment of how well progress is being made on different goals. Of course, we're talking about ocean accounts, so this is looking at all the different goals from the perspective of SDG 14 on oceans. And so I think there's great potential there for ocean accounts, and I think African countries starting from basic levels could actually probably pick up and advance very quickly in these areas because the need is so great and the potential is very high.
That's incredibly positive, I think. This hasn't really come up too much in the panel discussion so far, but you mentioned it early on. Really, as someone with your background who's really focused on coastal and marine ecosystems and these natural assets play a huge role within ocean accounts. How can you see, either within East Africa where you've worked or even globally, how can you see the use of ocean accounts and therefore the explicit sort of valuing and integration of these natural assets into the accounting framework as a benefit to sort of promoting sort of better conservation or protection of these ecosystems?
Oh, well, I think that's an essential support for conservation and sustainability. And here really understanding conservation as being really understanding how people and nature integrated together and how we manage nature for the sustainable use and access to ecosystem services, as well as of the natural and wilderness areas that have, global benefits in terms of carbon sequestration and climate regulation and things like that. So I've been very much involved in coral reef monitoring in East Africa and in the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network. And one of the great challenges that we still have is, of course, we have a network for compiling data, we're pulling it together, but the role of that data in countries really understanding and valuing the reef systems that they have and putting in place the right sorts of management and protection, there's still a big gap there. And I think this is at the core of efforts under, I'm also part of the Global Ocean Observing System, the GOOS Biology and Ecosystems Panel. We've established these essential ocean variables for trying to understand the health of the ocean across, all the different systems that we can. But these data systems are there, they're being built. And so the opportunity to put them into ocean accounting processes to really inform high-level decision-making about managing those ocean systems, I think is really important. The opportunity is great that we're getting to this now, particularly at the beginning of the decade of ocean science too, where we could really advance this very, very fast.
Thanks, David. I want to come to Claire now, who's been very patient throughout this. Claire, you obviously sort of head up the team that works on this within the OECD, and in particular, as Catherine mentioned earlier, the OECD's work on satellite accounts. Can you sort of provide a quick overview on I suppose, how satellite accounts fit into this discussion of ocean accounts, what some of the benefits are, and in particular, sort of some of those pilot projects that Catherine mentioned. I know you're working specifically with Canada and Portugal, two of the Ocean Panel members on this.
Thank you very much, Eliza. It's lovely to join this great panel. So as we discussed earlier, sustainability can only be assessed or achieved with accurate and reliable indicators on the state of the ocean environment. We just heard about the ocean essential variables that are crucial to have, but also on the human activities that are taking place in the ocean. So for us at the OECD, the ocean economy is based on two big pillars. the many diverse ocean economic activities. That's where we are really building up right now a draft satellite account, and the crucial marine ecosystem services that we depend on. We believe that both pillars can and should be measured, and we do have definitions and statistical frameworks that we can start using, and more is coming. We just heard from Glenn-Marie about the CR framework. We have advances to come on blue natural capital accounting, and from David on valuation of coral reefs. So there are many advances that are on the way. So on this pillar of the ocean economy, where I lead some research at the OECD, we aim to measure better ocean economic activities nationally and internationally. And we work closely with our national accounts colleagues within the organization, marine experts from the scientific community and from ocean industries, and obviously with delegates from many countries, many of which are members of the Ocean Panel like Canada. We are in the process of developing a blueprint for measurement of these ocean economic activities via a satellite accounting approach with a number of pilot countries, with practical definitions of ocean economic activities and a list of products and services to help really countries improve the evidence on their own ocean economy. So this is really one part of the equation. So you asked me about the benefits of the satellite accounting approach, and I will mention here just three. The first one is that in such a statistical framework, the ocean economy data can be comparable across industries and between countries. Such satellite account of economic activities can also link, and that's very important for us, with environmental accounts that are developed in parallel, so that many new indicators on pressures and impacts can be developed to monitor and use more sustainably the ocean environment. A second big benefit is that a satellite account allows you to actually dig much deeper in how the ocean economy works, and it helps track how the activities can relate and impact on each other. The data in what we call a supply and use table allow you to detail how input from one industry are used in the production of another. So you can extract a lot of information on which to build more effective policymaking. And that's very important if you wish to support one sector or the other. And finally, a third benefit, and I think that was really one of the key lessons learned coming from the blue paper, is that a satellite account approach allows you to create new types of indicators, new dashboards, like it's suggested in the blue paper, to measure success and failure in achieving much wider policy objectives. For the ocean, that's going to be crucial. Here, I just mentioned one pillar where we are doing a lot of work, but the other pillar on natural capital is crucial. And at the end of the day, a dashboard will help you actually take the best off from the two and make sure that you get to sustainable use of the ocean.
And Claire, sort of what, in your experience, have been some of the biggest lessons learnt so far from those countries that have started developing or developed satellite accounts for the ocean economy? What can we learn?
Sure. So one important thing to remember, and several panelists have mentioned it, it's still early days. We are still building many things. And although some general framework exists, and we talked about the CR several times, there are not yet international guidelines for ocean economy satellite accounts. The government of Portugal became the first country to produce an experimental ocean economy satellite account in 2016. That's still very recent. But they were able to calculate ocean economy gross value added, imports, exports, employment, investment in a manner that really ensures that each metric is comparable with broader statistics in the Portuguese economy. Now they're going into a second round in their satellite account work. Since the publication of this Portuguese satellite account, there are quite a number of countries that have launched satellite account work, including the United States. We just released a couple of months ago the results of its own experimentation with an ocean satellite account. Over the past couple of months, we had a dozen meetings with different countries, and we see a lot of activities, a lot of interest. So at the end of the day, I think this work that we're doing on the blueprint is going to hopefully help quite a number of countries actually get a sense of some of the steps in building up an ocean satellite account. But maybe two lessons learned here. Not all countries want to develop or will want to develop immediately a full-fledged satellite account. It's a lot of work. We have satellite accounts for tourism, we have satellite accounts for health. It's quite complex. But as our head of national accounts at OECD keeps saying, start counting now. Really, this could form the baseline to actually build up later on a satellite account. And I think that's a key lesson learned here. There are already definitions that exist. There are more practical guidelines that are coming, like Glenn-Marie mentioned. So as soon as you can develop this baseline, even imperfect, that will help you, and that will help your decision making. And the second big lesson learned, and I think several people mentioned that already, is that ocean satellite accounts and even ocean economy measurement efforts are really the results of a close collaboration between national accounts experts or statisticians, scientists, and ocean industry experts. You need to have different groups of people coming in with sometimes very different culture to actually make sure so that you get a good ocean economy measurement in the end.
Thanks, Claire. And I think that point echoed Tirupong's from earlier in the sense of, you know, don't wait, sort of work with what you've got now and begin this process, which I think is a really key takeaway that we can have from this panel. Very quickly, and David mentioned this as well right at the end of his last question, given how recent, as you mentioned, Portugal's first development in 2016, how can we use the upcoming decade for ocean science to sort of supercharge, if you like, progress around ocean accounts?
Well, there are many opportunities to be taken during the UN decade. So let me mention maybe just two. The first one is that currently the value of ocean scientific research and development is still poorly recognized, even in general accounting approaches, I would say. There are efforts at the international level to measure the budgets, employment in ocean science. One example is obviously the IOC Global Ocean Science Report, with a new version that will come before the end of the year. But we don't know yet how ocean science really contributes to economic activities more generally. And I think that's going to be crucial as we may see budgets tightened a little bit over the next couple of years. So does ocean science generate value added? We think it does, obviously, but we need the evidence. How are the outputs of ocean science used and built upon by other parts of the economy? Mm-hmm. How are these relationships changing over time? These are questions that the satellite account approach, measuring the ocean economy, should eventually be able to answer. So here, that's already an opportunity to actually push for more work on this value of ocean science. But perhaps, and that's my second point, the largest gains to be had relates to the environmental accounting. We know that much progress is still required before ocean economy satellite accounts include the full set of environmental economic linkages. So it's important not to lose sight of the experimental nature of some of the environmental accounting at present, but here with the UN decade, we see this as an opportunity to conduct baseline estimations of ecosystem coverage for physical ecosystem accounts. There are many different scientific missions that are planned already that will directly link, I think, to some of these efforts in environmental valuation. So that's where I see some very strong linkages between the scientific community and some of the economists, particularly environmental economists that are in the panel.
Thanks so much, Claire. So we're going to turn, I'm cognizant of time, but turn to sort of the audience Q&A. And as we're looking through some of those questions, Eli, I'm going to ask you one sort of final concluding question to round off the panel. In the paper, you talk about the existence of a database of ocean accounts as being a prerequisite for informed, rational policy making and decision taking. I think as we are all looking and considering how we recover from COVID-19 and how we spend the billions and trillions of dollars that are starting to go into stimulus and recovery packages, what are some of the opportunities to use this investment, to use this moment of resetting to integrate ocean accounting into national systems? And what are some of the benefits that you see for the sort of long-term economic recovery and resilience, I suppose, of of our ocean economic system of doing so?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think working on this paper and really digging into not only how the accounts are done, but the history of accounting, national accounting particularly, and understanding its role in wartime production in World War II and then administering the Marshall Plan has really had me thinking a lot about where we are now. I think there's a couple things. One is we have this great opportunity when we plan for recovery to worry about, or to at least consider, the interactions with other kinds of investments. I think one of the key things about an oceans account that it does is it allows people who aren't oceans people to talk about the ocean, right? And I think that's one of we often get confused that we're not building oceans accounts for people who are already particularly worried about oceans in the sense to convince them they need to worry more. We're helping them see the perspectives of people who might be trying to balance across a broad set of things, and those people who are balancing across a broad set of things, taking the ocean seriously, because if it's not there, it gets ignored. I mean, that's fundamentally the challenge. But it really comes down to what are the interactions? Increasingly, there's research that's looking at how does changes in natural capital actually affect demand for produced capital, and could that affect the way that central banks make interest rates? Right, like there's some very wonky, detail-y things, but we need to get the data to the surface to have those conversations. Be like, oh, this is something to worry about, or at least consider. But I also think there's this amazing opportunity with our oceans accounts in general, which is to lead the way on thinking about how we do accounting for sustainable development more broadly. You know, the high-level panel countries. They're not a small share of the world population either, right? And there's a lot of leadership, and you know, the countries that are involved are all doing very unique, innovative things. By trying to just put a few other measures out there, we can look at, you know, airspeed and elevation, not just one, and maybe they both matter not to crash. I think that's really the key, is to go back and understand that these are, you know, the doctor doesn't just take your pulse. You don't just look at the speed of your car, right? And this is not a this or that. It's a few important things to pay attention to. We can walk and chew gum, I think, when it comes to managing sustainable development.
Thanks, Eli. That's an excellent point and a number of very clear metaphors to finish on. Thank you. So in terms of turning to the audience Q&A now, I'm going to, first one for David. David, you know, when you were speaking, you spoke about natural units of measurement as opposed to monetary units. I'm just wondering if you could expand upon what you meant there.
Yes, thanks, Liza. Certainly, I'm very happy to do that because I've found this a big frustration all the time. And the example I can give most simply is about fish. And fishery statistics are very commonly reported in monetary value of fish that are caught at various levels, but also in the kilograms of fish that are caught. And you can look at both when looking at fishery statistics. But other things are much harder to convert into monetary units. And now I think there's very little computational challenges in combining data sets from different systems, such as kilograms of fish, percent cover of coral, you know, area of mangroves and the health of the mangrove system. And we can consider these things in their natural units. We don't have to just convert them into monetary values to compare one with the other. And I think the ocean accounts or the accounting systems will facilitate that on a much larger scale than we've been able to do today.
Thanks, David. And Catherine, I have a question here for you as well. And this touches on one of the points you made earlier about sort of the importance for Canada and for any development process for ocean accounts to consider, you know, to be inclusive, to be equitable as part of what we think of when we mean sustainability. What are some, practically, I suppose, how has Canada, and then sort of what lessons can we draw globally for being inclusive and equitable in the development of ocean accounts?
Thanks very much, Eliza. That's a great question. And look, I'll just give you an example about something that Canada achieved as we advanced on our marine conservation targets. You know, planning that for how to achieve that, there were a number of approaches, but I can tell you where we had the most success and where there was unanimity. It's not easy in the context of marine spatial planning, marine conservation. There are interests, right? And understanding and being able to articulate the trade-offs is something that that leaders need to do all of the time. I would tell you that the marine conservation areas that Canada set out, and again, we made tremendous progress from a 20-year period of not a ton of progress at all. The times that the areas that we did the best were when we brought the most diverse groups to the table. And, you know, we have marine conservation area in the high Arctic led by the landowners, the Inuit. You know, there could not be a better embodiment of how to bring diverse opinions to the table, to bring, like, any decision is better when all of the perspectives are considered. And, you know, I would say, and again, I'm going to talk about the high Arctic example, because there would be assumptions people would make, but actually working and being led by the Inuit, the considerations they had, the particular economic sovereignty and the elements they would like to consider, would that have come into consideration in a typical time? Not sure. So I am an absolute proponent that the more diversity that comes into these kinds of decision making, better benefits for sure, and sustainable.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, Catherine. Next question is for Glenn-Marie. And again, sort of brings up a point I think Eli was talking about on that last question. Can you share your thoughts on the role of central banks in scaling up national accounting for the ocean and ocean economy?
Central banks have been extremely concerned about the environment. Just this year, there was a joint report from the Bank for International Settlements, which is like the central bank of central banks, and the Central Bank of France, called Green Swan. And it was saying that we are facing tremendous uncertainty and risks related to climate change, affecting both our natural assets and the things that we produce. And that we need to move, instead of a short-term kind of a deterministic valuation of assets, to one that reflects the risks and the resilience. And so I think there's a lot of interest among leading agencies. The head of the IMF has also called for this. So I think there's a recognition by many that we need to start looking at this, and the oceans in particular, and from this resilience perspective. It's a great book, by the way, or report. I would recommend everyone read it. Very, very accessible.
Thanks, Glenn-Marie. Next question is, I think I would at least like to hear from both Claire and Eli on this one. The question is, in 2018, OECD published a paper suggesting the inclusion of measures of societal performance other than financial and monetary ones in terms of sort of the economics of well-being or happiness. I think we're already seeing New Zealand that's sort of integrating some of these indicators nationally already. So I suppose first from Claire to speak a little bit to that report and the OECD's view about bringing in sort of well-being and happiness, and then from Eli's to sort of more practically how countries could consider doing this within their ocean accounts and in fact how it's already being done already.
Sure. So the result of this recent work on well, the OECD has been for many years doing some work on well-being indicators, The idea is that GDP describes market economic outputs. It's really used as a proxy for economic welfare and general welfare in general. But GDP is just one indicator out of many that could be used to actually describe how a society is progressing. And when assessing a country's health, it's useful to have a broader dashboard of indicators that can help you get a sense of how citizens feel in terms of economic insecurity, in terms of their health, in terms of also social, economic, environmental dimensions. How do they feel in their own country? Now, linking this to the satellite account work for the ocean, it's still very early stages, but I would assume that indeed some of these more qualitative indicators could in the end be included. Not all of them, obviously, but as I mentioned, as soon as you start putting together the right type of satellite account where you can actually track the impact of one sector on the other, you can get so much more information also that can be then derived and brought together in a broader dashboard. So at the end of the day, equality to marine resources, types of employment, dangerous or not, all these types of indicators would ideally be part of a broader dashboard for an ocean account. That would be, I think, one of the goals, but it's going to take time, step by step. Eli, you probably have a lot to say on this.
Thanks. No, Claire, that was great. So I think what's being asked is the difference between what are often called subjective measures of well-being and objective measures of well-being. And both matter. So the issue with subjective measures of well-being is there are certain, if you look at sort of countries that often come out ahead on this area, sometimes we can look at them and say their objective measures of well-being are clearly misaligned. And different cultures will respond to these differently. They're very hard to compare across countries. They can be useful, but again, they're most useful in sort of changes within a country, as opposed to sort of these big international comparisons, I believe. I think the other issue is, as Claire was saying, we can do better with objective measures of well-being as well, measures of human capital formation and human capital preservation, health and education, and these things that are not necessarily short-term market outcomes, but can be thought of as objective measures of well-being, but are much broader and more inclusive than our traditional sort of GDP income, market income style measures. So I think there's a role for both. I don't think that the subjective measures can easily be added into the kind of accounting systems that we've been discussing, but can be put on a dashboard to look at how they're comparing the changes in some of the objective measures. And clearly, if things are moving in the same direction, maybe that's a good sign. If they're moving in different directions, maybe that's a flag for people to dig deeper. And I think this goes back to the earlier question about, equity and inclusion as well. There's sort of two bits there. I think accounts, particularly objective and even subjective measures, can tell us about distribution. They can't tell us about equity and inclusion because that has sort of a, that's distribution interpreted through a sort of preference system or a moral system. But going to more democratized reporting and these dashboarding systems, one of the most important definitions of inclusivity is defining the boundaries of what counts. And by being able to toggle on and off different boundaries in different sectors or different equity weights, we can start to look at how much do these matter. Sometimes they really matter, and sometimes we have weeks or months of discussion about how to do something, and then if we do it both ways, we find out that we would make pretty similar inferences after the fact. So I think that's the other part of that, is the subjective measure, the most important part where these come together, is defining the boundaries. And again, those boundaries right now are often being defined by technical people like me, or like Glenn Marie, or people who are in the room about sort of writing these guidance documents, rather than saying, well, we don't actually know what the right boundary is for every decision, but let's create a reporting system so that people like Catherine can actually explore the boundaries and ask, is this worth worrying about? Does it matter? How is it going to change inclusion or equity? Where they, leaders can determine equity and inclusion, we can really only determine distribution. And this is true whether it's subjective or objective measures.
Thanks, Eli. Incredibly helpful. So I think we've got time for one more question. I'm going to ask that question to the entire panel, and it picks up on sort of several of the themes that have come through some of the audience Q&A, particularly around natural capital. And that's what suggestions do the panel have for how we scale up the capacity, the skills, and the sort of expertise to value ocean natural capital, sort of understanding that that's really perhaps where the bottleneck is in terms of informed decision making, marine spatial planning that's been mentioned by many of the panelists, and sort of unlocking some of the finance necessary to drive forward implementation. So anyone that wants to jump in on that, question again is what suggestions to scale up capacity development and the skills necessary to actually value the natural capital from the ocean.
All right, Glenn Murray here. So I was looking for a hand raise. I didn't want to jump in and cut someone off. Look, I mean, I think we need to progress in multiple dimensions. We need to develop practical technical guidelines that can be easily implemented in, say, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So depending on capacity data, people can at least get started. We need to start talking about it at the high level, at 2 levels, practitioner, high level, to promote this, send the signals that this is essential for managing a sustainable ocean going forward, give the tools to actually do this, and then start doing the things that David and colleagues in Africa are doing. Get together virtually and talk about how we can use this. Bring people together. How can we bring together the 2 different bits, the economic perspective, the great marine science that's going on, and how can this then be used to inform decision making? I mean, we have 2 programs, a natural capital accounting program, the old WAVES program, and ProBlue that's trying to work. And the more we can find out about others, particularly bilateral efforts as well, so that we can share this information, this will help move it much more quickly.
Perhaps if I can jump in there, Liza, because I'll build straight on what Glenn Marie said, is really building on what is already developing in terms of capacity building in marine science and data collection. And I think a key thing, particularly coming from the science community now, is getting people to realize the value of data when it's combined and shared and integrated, as opposed to the model that we still have in science, which is very much around private data and publications, and there being a delay until data actually gets out into a shared domain. I think we need a lot of advance on that as soon as possible.
So maybe I'll chime in too. I think building on what David just said, I think the world of data is moving super fast. And so I think this is a challenge, is to always be bringing in new people and working, finding, some solutions are finding people from industry who can come and work for short periods of time and train and work with people. I think the other challenge that we're facing, which is really fascinating in the national accounting for the environment space broadly, is the tension between free sharing of data and the protection of privacy and information. So we have a lot of we have increasing, as David was pointing out, increasingly wonderful Earth observation and the ability to produce mass amounts of biophysical data that might not be overly sensitive, but actually might be really high value in some spheres for private industry. And to understand how people are interacting with the natural environment, I mean, we do have things like cell phone locations to look at trip taking, and we have business receipts and tax receipts, and these are all incredibly sensitive. And so we need a way to actually deal with using the sensitive information responsibly by probably a relatively small group of officials who sort of have lockbox access, and bring it together with these platforms of terabytes of biophysical data. And this is very just sort of cutting edge computer science and management of lots of data. It's there. We know how to do it. We also need some policy guidelines about whether we should, like, are the risks of interacting individual data with the environment worth the benefits for policymakers? Because there are some risks there. So I think we need to be we do need to have those conversations as well.
Thanks, Eli. Does anyone else want to come in on this?
Just jump in here.
Yep.
Well, if let me turn the question in this way. What would you do if you want to do something you don't know what to do? And the first thing is to talk to people who know what to do. And Cameron already said about the World Bank, about the WES project. There are many partners that you can talk to. I was with UNSCAP before, and they also have capacity development programs, specifically on the SEA and also extending to ocean accounts. We now have the GOAP, who also have, like Cameron said, has the training and capacity building activities to support countries. And OECD has done great work on the satellite accounting part of it. I think there are knowledge, there are people, and there are partnerships that we can start reaching out to. The key is to go out and talk to someone. I see many. Well, I work mostly in the statisticians group, and when they have problem, they will get together and talk about problem. And sometimes they don't know the answer, just keep talking about the problem until they found the answer. Might be in this fast moving world, might be also easier to start talking to scientists, start talking to policy people, start talking to people who never talk, that you wouldn't think you would talk to, and you might get answer faster than you thought.
Thanks, Cherpong. I think we might need to leave it there and wrap up unless there's any final remarks from the panelists that haven't been able to come in on that question.
Eliza, if I can, I could just say that ultimately in policymaking, it's understanding the trade-offs, and it's been a really robust and helpful conversation that exposes that we need comparable and robust data so we can assess what those trade-offs are. So thank you very much for the time.
Thanks, Catherine. So we are now a little bit over time, but I think that really represents just how rich and comprehensive this panel discussion has been. I personally have found it incredibly positive and uplifting that this does make sense, that we need to do this if we are to achieve a sustainable ocean economy, and that it's possible, and that we don't need to wait for perfect capacity and perfect data sets to be able to jump in and start developing these ocean accounts. And in fact, that there is a lot of support and networks for coordination, for knowledge exchange that are already out there and can be seized upon. So I wanted to thank all the panelists again for being able to join. It was a very early morning for some of you, very late at night for others. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights. And in particular, thank you to Eli for presenting this paper. The details, I mentioned this at the start, are on the slide in front of you. Obviously, please go to the Ocean Panel website to find this blue paper. We've got a summary for decision makers. We've got a blog on it, as well as all of our other blue papers and research materials. We've also got a link there to the interactive Norway dashboard that Eli presented on in the blog that also was published today. There's actually a video that steps you through how to use that dashboard. That could be an excellent resource. So thank you all again. I think we've got the next slide where we've got our next webinar coming up for our next blue paper launch, which is on organised crime associated with fisheries on the 18th of August. So please again log on to our events page pre-register for that, and we really look forward to that discussion as well. So thank you to everyone that's joined today. I hope you have a good rest of your day or evening. Thank you.